Hi, welcome to another video in the CMAT Innovation and Entrepreneurship series, wherein we learn different management concepts, theories through various questions. So let's start with question 1. Now the question says, which type of market is characterized by numerous sellers with no control over pricing, making them price takers? Now, whenever you have question like this, wherein you are asked to find, let's say there are multiple sellers, the word numerous should give you some hint, because you may not be an economics student, you may not have read, let's say, economic concepts in the past, or you have not done, let's say, BMS, BBA, things like that. Even in that case, you should be aware of some of these terms. And if you pay attention to the words, you should be able to eliminate using the meaning of the word. The first one says monopoly. Now, the word mono suggests singular, and because we are talking about numerous sellers, this is definitely not going to be my answer. Monopoly is something where you have, let's say, one particular seller who has control over the market. So that particular seller can decide what the pricing should be. The second says perfect competition, which is what we see in most industries, wherein you have lot of sellers, lot of players present in the market, and most likely this is going to be our answer, but we'll look at the next option as well. The third one says oligopoly with strategic pricing among a few dominant firms. Now, oligopoly happens when you have, let's say, few dominant sellers. So let's say there are 3 or 4 players in the market who basically govern what the pricing should be, right? They have large control over the market. It's not monopoly, because monopoly is singular. Oligopoly means there are multiple sellers, but limited multiple sellers. The final says monopolistic competition. Again, because of the word mono, you can straight away eliminate that. So in this particular question, even though if you don't know the exact meaning, the interpretation of the terms, you can understand that option B sounds to be the best, which says perfect competition where there are numerous sellers, and it says that because of identical products and many sellers. So generally there's no product differentiation that is possible when you have too many sellers. Let's move to question 2. During which stage of team development? Now this is one important area from the organizational behavior concepts that you have, which is on team development. So there are various stages of team development, and these stages are given here. What they're asking is, do members align expectations and embrace shared roles? Now there are different stages. I'm going to tell you which stages are these. So you have a stage called forming, where essentially the team formation is happening. The other is storming, right? Then there is norming and performing. Now, norm, as the word suggests, right? Norm is basically some sort of a practice. So members aligning expectations, and that is why this is our answer, which is the norming stage. The sequence of the stage is important, because that also could be asked as a question to arrange these in a particular sequence or in the right sequence. So the answer for the question is norming. The address, you have to understand the order and you have to figure out exactly how they move. So forming, storming, norming, performing. Now there is one more step which was added by Tuckman. So this model was given by Tuckman, and that particular stage, which is something that got added at a later point of time, is a stage called adjourning, right? Because a lot of times teams come together and then you end the structure, right? So the team members go back to their respective organizations or their individual teams and so on. So there is a final stage which is called adjourning, that is also there. But typically these are the 4 stages that are the part of the initial Tuckman's model. The adjourning, as I said, is something that got added at a later point of time. Let's move to the next one, right? So what is the main objective of job analysis in human resource management? Now, why would you analyze a particular job, right? You would try to identify, okay, what kind of skills are required for that particular job, right? So generally that gives you the answer, but of course let's look at the options. The first is identifying the required skills and responsibilities for a job. This definitely is our answer, but let's look at the others. Determining an employee's cultural fit, not really. Job analysis will not help you evaluate that component. Benchmarking salaries against industry standards, though this is an exercise that is taken by all the HR departments, this is not what the objective of job analysis is. And designing training programs for potential hires. So typically you don't design programs like that. You already have job analysis and descriptions that are in place, and basis that you have created training programs. So this is not again the main objective of job analysis, though it is something that can happen, but it's not the main objective. Okay, so that is why we'll go with option 1, which is identifying the required skills. Moving on to the next question. Which activity is least likely to be associated with strategic talent management? Okay, so strategy long term, least likely something that is not directly impacting, right? First is developing career advancement plans. Yes, important. When it comes to strategy, you want to have, okay, what should be the career advancement plan for various individuals in the organization. Second is managing union contract negotiations. Now, generally, union contract negotiations is a short-term thinking, right? Because you have, let's say, contract that is drafted for a couple of years, you are not really messing around too much with that, right? So typically, this will not be the answer, but let's see. Designing leadership training programs. Yes, again, thinking on the long-term horizon. Establishing succession planning frameworks, right? So all succession planning or the career advancement thing that we discuss in option A as well, these are thinking about the long term. Whereas managing union contract negotiations, this is largely going to be a short-term exercise, and that is why not strategic in its outlook, right? So that's what we'll go with as the final answer. Let's move to question 5. How does HR best contribute to fostering a culture aligned with company values? Okay, so now we're talking about aligning the culture and the company values. As I mentioned in the earlier video as well, you have to look at the keywords that are there in the question, and sometimes that helps you in making intelligent guesswork about the answer. The first says enforcing compliance with regulation. Now, compliance essentially is not something that generally people like. Of course, that is an important thing, but it's not really about fostering a culture aligned with company values, right? It's an important thing, but not going to be the best option most likely. Let's look at the others. Facilitating organizational change and adaptability, right? Definitely important because you're looking at long term. The organization has to be nimble, quick, something that you can adapt to changing situations and all of that. Looks better than definitely option A. Managing payroll operations. Again, day-to-day operations, not really strategic in the long sense. And implementing strict cost reduction measures. Again, very, very short-term measure, right? Generally, when things are not doing well, the revenue is not that much or there's a need to cut down costs, you will exercise these measures. But for now, we'll go with this as the answer, which is facilitating organizational change and adaptability, because that is really something that is creating culture in the organization, right? Let's move on to next one. Question 6, why do businesses perform cost, volume, profit analysis? Okay, now there are 3 words that are there: cost, volume, profit. Cost would be the individual cost of the product and the overall cost of the organization. Volume would be the number of units sold, or let's say the number of clients, etc. And then the profit. It could be profit per unit sold, or profit per client, and so on and so forth, and the overall organizational profit. So why do businesses perform this sort of an analysis? The first one says to determine fixed and variable cost implications. Looks okay, but let's see if we have better choice. To evaluate how cost and sales volume affect profit. Now this is clearly addressing the 3 terms that are given, right, which is cost, volume, profit. So because it is addressing that directly, we will go with option B as the answer. The others are to benchmark operating cost against competitors. Not really, because it is not addressing the 3 things that are mentioned. And to forecast long-term financial performance. Not really. So we'll go with option B as the final answer. Let's move on to the next one, which says which valuation method, so there are different valuation methods that exist, predict stock prices using future dividend expectation. Now your answer definitely should have something to do with dividend in it. The first one says dividend discount model. Second is capital asset pricing model, CAPM as it is called, and again something which is taught in business schools. Arbitrage pricing theory, which is on the difference. So the word arbitrage is essentially about the difference between, let's say, the price of a particular product or service in different markets and how you can leverage that to your advantage. And finally, the price earning ratio, right, which is something that, again, if you are active in the markets, you have definitely come across PE ratio as a term. So from here, the only one which directly addresses the question, which is the dividend model or the dividend discount model. There are, of course, too many things to sort of read into, but I would suggest that you, for now, this much is enough and you can sort of live with this for now. Let's move on to question 8. So which financial metric evaluates the return potential of capital investment? Now generally when you have large projects, and again something that you will study in B school, is that there are different methods in which you evaluate whether you should first of all get into that particular project or not. So is the project financially making sense? Now, one of the methods for that is what is called the internal rate of return, right? There is another method called the present value, right, which is something that again we saw in one of the videos. But here, as you see, there is internal rate of return, which is called IRR. So it will tell you that there's a certain IRR of a particular investment. Now you take a call whether that IRR makes sense to you or not. There is debt equity ratio, there is working capital turnover, current ratio, and so on. These do not directly deal with the capital investment and what's the return on it. The only one that directly deals with it is the IRR, which is the internal rate of return. So I would suggest that you look at two things to read more about it: the present value and the net present value and the internal rate of return. Now, internal rate of return, think of it as a very basic, some of you who have not really come across these terms, I would say one of the simplest formulas where you have seen it is the compound interest formula, right? So A is equal to P into 1 plus R upon 100 raised to N. Uh, in that, the R is what we are looking at, right? So that is the rate of return. So of course, it's a very complicated thing when you do it over a long period of time, because the rate can also fluctuate, and a lot of different economic situations can change, and that is why it's a slightly difficult thing to calculate, not as simple as this, the way you see on screen, where the IRR is given as future value raised to 1 upon periods upon present value, and then you do a -1. But of course, for large projects that are multi-year projects, you're going to have complicated mechanism to finally evaluate at the internal rate of return. For now, let's move on to the next one. Why do organizations conduct value chain analysis? Now, value chain as the term, what it suggests is that at different points of time, so think of it as a chain. So you have the raw material, and from there on you have the finished goods. At different points of time, different value is getting added in the whole thing to create the final product. So the value chain analysis is essentially to identify, okay, at what places what value is getting added. Essentially, that is what it is. Let's look at the option. It says to identify customer-centric value creation activities. Yes, definitely an important thing, because as you move from, let's say, start to end, at different points of time, the value, some sort of value will get added, right? Let's say you have, let's say, sugarcane, right? You have the raw material. From there on, you can create a lot of things, right? You can create a juice, you can create, let's say, some sort of sweeteners and things like that. At different points of time in that activity, value will start getting added to create the end product. So when you do a value chain analysis, you exactly evaluate, okay, where, what kind of value is getting added. So that is why this definitely looks like a nice answer, but let's see the others. To forecast lifetime customer profitability, not really, that's not the objective of value chain analysis. To optimize delivery process, delivery comes after the service or the product has been created, right? So that is why not right now. To segment the target market, this is a segmentation exercise. The last one essentially talks about segmentation. It is not value chain analysis. So the answer for the question is going to be option A. Let's move on to next one. According to ANSOF matrix, and this is an important concept in management strategy, you will keep hearing this word, this name again and again. So ANSOF matrix, and I'll show you the matrix. Which strategy involves entering untapped markets with current offerings? So there are some keywords, the first of which is untapped market, right? So untapped market is something where you're not there at this point of time with current offerings, meaning you have some offering right now and you're going to use them to enter an untapped market. So which of the four strategies is this? Let's look at the answer, but for that you need to know this figure. Now there are four parts to this figure. I'll just explain what it is. So there is markets on this axis, there are products on this axis. In each of them there are two parts. There is a new product, new market and existing market. On the product side, new product and existing products. So the intersection creates a 2 by 2 matrix, and in this 2 by 2 you have four things, each of them talking about what strategy you are following. So if I say there is an existing market and an existing product, what you are doing is market penetration strategy. Versus if you have, let's say, a new market, which is this part of the 2 by 2, and there is an existing product, you have something called market development strategy. So you're essentially developing the market. If it is existing market, you have a new product, that's a product development strategy. Versus if you have, let's say, the last one, which is new market and new product, this is diversification strategy. So let's go back to our question and understand what it is talking about. So it says entering untapped market. So we are talking about new markets. So our answer is going to be something from this, correct? And then it says with current offerings. So you already have a product which is the existing product. So that is why the intersection of the two things that I've drawn, you can see that this talks about market development strategy. So our answer is going to be market development. This is an important concept from management. You have to know it. I would suggest that you have a look at this. Igor Ansoff was the person who gave it, and it's called Ansoff's matrix. Okay. All right, let's move on to question 11. What is the least relevant factor in choosing a facility location? It is an easy question. When you look at the option, you'll realize why I make that statement. Least relevant factor in choosing a facility location. Let's say you are the CEO or the owner of a company. You're trying to figure out where should I put my next facility. Should your preferred vacation spot really matter? The answer is no. So this should not make a difference. Local workforce ability, yes, I would want to have a facility at a place where, let's say, there are skilled workers available. Proximity to key suppliers, yes, so that I reduce the transportation cost. Cost of land and operations, definitely, because let's say if I decide to have something in Mumbai versus, let's say, something which is in a village, let's say 500 kilometers away, that also becomes an important parameter. So the one that will have the least impact, that is going to be, or least relevance, is going to be CEO's preferred vacation spot, because that has got nothing to do with, let's say, the organization's facility location decision. Let's move on to the next one. What function do ERP systems? Now, what is ERP? ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning. So these are the systems that help organizations run in a better manner, right? So things like automating stuff, making sure that people are not wasting time in things that are not value adding, right? So a lot of these things take care of, the ERP system takes care of it. For example, Tally, right? Some of you may have used Tally. Now Tally is also an ERP, right? It helps you to document transactions, and it makes life easy for everybody, because think of, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years back, everything was written by hands, right? So accounts were written by hands. Now people don't do that because you have the transaction processing systems, right? So there are different things that are available, whether it is MIS, TPS, the executive support systems and things like that. One very important thing is the ERP, right? So Enterprise Resource Planning. Now they are asking what function it primarily serves in modern organizations. Now monitoring employee behavior, not really, I'll not be able to figure out that using ERP. Of course, some things that are, let's say, getting noted, things that are obvious, may be able to find through ERP as well, but not really, right? So the behavior is a very complex mechanism. Automating core business processes, definitely. So think of Tally, as I said, as an example, where now it has become easy for people to process the entire financial data very, very quickly. So they'll be able to trace the money, where it is coming in, where it is from where it is coming in, from where it is going out, and things like that very easily. So that is what our answer is going to be. Tracking customer reviews, forecasting industry trends, not really, not something that an ERP can do. This definitely is external, and ERP is internal. So you can again eliminate this option purely basis that as well. Let's move on to the next one, which is what is the primary objective of the World Trade Organization? Now I've just given some additional information there, the logo of the organization and the location of the headquarters, which is Geneva, Switzerland, because again that is something that can be asked as a question. So what is the primary objective? Enhancing agricultural trade exclusively. So generally extremist or very one-sided kind of options, you can eliminate those things. This I'm going to eliminate because it says exclusively. So are they enhancing agricultural trade through some of their initiatives? The answer is yes, but because it says exclusively, I'm going to reject it. Facilitating global trade partnerships, yes, definitely. They create forum where different organizations can come together and interact, facilitating cross-border trade and stuff like that. So looks good. Reducing poverty through economic aid, not really. Of course, because of a lot of things that they do, this can happen as an outcome, but that is not the primary objective. And promoting unilateral trade agreements. Again, not necessarily unilateral trade agreements. They can have different kinds of agreements that they're promoting. That is why we can eliminate this one. So facilitating global trade partnerships looks to be the best option in this particular case. Let's move on to the penultimate question. Why do businesses use SWOT analysis? Okay, now what is SWOT? So I'm sure some of you have heard this: strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, right? So that's what the SWOT stands for. So for anything, whether it is an organization or as an individual, you can do this analysis to figure out, okay, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, basis those things, what sort of opportunities that I can have, and what can be, let's say, a threat for me. For example, if I don't know how to use a computer, right, is that a threat to me? The answer is yes, right? But if I can read and write, can I learn computer? Can I, let's say, change my career because of that? Yes, so that may be an opportunity for me. So of course, organizations, the context is different, and they're trying to figure out what strength and weaknesses they have and what opportunities and threat they can get. So why do businesses use this? To identify external opportunities and threats? Definitely this is good answer. To calculate ROI? Not really. To determine customer lifetime value? Again, not really. To forecast competitive pricing trends? Again, see, the competitive part of it is still fine, but we are not necessarily getting into any sort of trend prediction. So I can eliminate this as well, right? So it's a fairly simple question. Anything that directly addresses the cause, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat part, I would go with that as the final answer. And the last question for this particular video: what is the main objective of conducting market feasibility studies? Now the word feasibility suggests that you're trying to identify whether something should be done or it should not be done, or will it work out or will it not work out. So if I say that I think it looks feasible for me to complete this work in the next 2 days, I'm basically assessing a possibility, right, that it can happen. So what is the main objective of conducting that sort of an analysis in an organizational context? So it says determining consumer demand and competitive factors. Looks good, because if let's say you want to create a new product or a service, or you are entering a new territory, you will be interested in knowing, okay, whether there is a demand or not in the first place, right? For example, if you go to a place where nobody is using electric vehicles, you may say that there is no demand for it, or you may say that it is an untapped market, so let me enter there. So you have to determine the consumer demand and competitive factors. Definitely looks good. Evaluating technological choices for production, though it's a decent option, but not for market feasibility studies, right? It will be some part of, so technological feasibility itself is, there is an area which is wherein you're trying to identify whether technologically possible or not. So this is another aspect. This is not really about the market feasibility. Deciding on operational legal structures, again, fairly internal, you're not thinking too much about it. Monitoring long-term financial outcomes. So this is more on the financial or the economic feasibility of the project or decision, but not about the market feasibility studies. Because here you're trying to identify whether, first of all, market exists or not. Because if it doesn't, then there is no point. So that is why we'll go with option A, which is consumer demand and competitive factors. Okay. So that's about it for this video. I hope again this has helped you, given you some things that you can take home and read up more about. I wish you all the best. I'll see you in the next one.